The Hellfire Club, Secrets Behind the Doors of Power and Scandal. Written and published, by Lord Cabura's Magic Haven. Introduction. In this audiobook, we at Lord Cabura's Magic Haven will guide you through a world of secret gatherings, hidden truths, and powerful men who shaped history from the shadows. The Hellfire Club, a name that rings with scandal, mystery, and hidden influence. This group was not just a group of rebellious aristocrats or wealthy men indulging in excess. This secret society was the place where power was not only discussed but manipulated. If you think you've heard it all about secret societies, think again. Think of shadowy rooms in magnificent houses, where the soft glow of candles plays over the faces of some of England's most important men from the 1700s. These men weren't just politicians or nobles, they were members of the Hellfire Club, a society shrouded in secrecy, infamous for its wild rituals, strange rites, and an insatiable thirst for power. But this wasn't merely a place for pleasure, it was also a place where decisions were made, alliances were forged, and the fate of nations have been quietly shaped behind closed doors. They lived outside the rules of society, but with their power, they influenced the rules for everyone else. This is not just a story about scandal, lawlessness, manipulation, it's a story of how influence and control were carefully orchestrated by a select few. How far did their reach extend? And who were the real men behind the masks? The club began in the early 18th century, started by Sir Francis Dashwood, an eccentric, wealthy man who found himself at odds with the traditional values of his time. His club attracted some of the most powerful men in England, nobles, politicians, even royalty. But these weren't your average social gatherings. Behind the lavish parties and elaborate rituals lay a deeper purpose. The club's motto, Fais ce que voudras, meaning, do what thou wilt, summed up their philosophy of living without restrictions. No rule was too sacred to break, and no indulgence was too sinful to explore. In the club, men like John Wilkes, a political agitator, and even Benjamin Franklin, a founding father of the United States, found a place where they could shed the mask of respectability and explore ideas that would have been scandalous outside those walls. For some, it was about rebellion, for others, it was about controlling the very systems they pretended to mock. But the key was always secrecy. As we journey through the chapters of this audiobook, you will uncover the hidden truths about this club. From the wild stories of their infamous rituals, rumors of devil worship, secret chambers, and underground passageways, to the ways in which they shaped political decisions and manipulated power from the shadows. You'll hear real-life stories of individuals whose involvement in the club would forever mark their reputations. Men like the eccentric Sir Francis Dashwood, whose lavish estates became the playground for this secret society, and John Montagu, 4th Earl of Sandwich, who found himself embroiled in scandal after scandal due to his association with the club. But it's not just about the men. This club, despite its decadent reputation, influenced political decisions that shaped British society and impacted the colonies across the Atlantic. The ripple effects of their meetings may have gone further than we'll ever truly know. In this audiobook, you won't just hear tales of excess and debauchery. You'll discover the real influence these men wielded, and how their secret gatherings have impacted everything from government decisions to wars fought far from their candlelit chambers. You'll also explore how their legacy lives on in modern portrayals, showing that their shadow still looms large over popular culture and conspiracy theories to this day. One of the most fascinating members of the Hellfire Club was John Wilkes, a notorious political figure. His involvement with the club was more than just an escape from the rigid social norms of his day. For Wilkes, the club was a platform where he could challenge the political establishment. Known for his controversial views on freedom of speech, he used his membership in the club to form connections with like-minded men. Though outwardly, he was criticized by many, his ties to the club gave him leverage in circles of power that would have been closed to others. Wilkes' battles for press freedom in the House of Commons would go on to inspire generations of activists. Benjamin Franklin, too, has a complicated relationship with the club. Though his involvement was peripheral, his time spent in Britain saw him mingling with Hellfire Club members. While his personal beliefs did not align with their hedonistic practices, Franklin was a man who understood the value of relationships, even with the most scandalous of society. His friendships with powerful Hellfire members no doubt helped him in his diplomatic efforts later in life. Franklin's association with the club reveals that even the most esteemed people can interact with the underbelly of society to achieve their objectives. But why are we still fascinated by the Hellfire Club? What is it about secret societies like these that continues to captivate our imaginations? Perhaps it's the idea that somewhere, hidden from view, a small group of people holds the reins of power. Or maybe it's the sense that there are always unseen forces shaping our world, and we're left trying to piece together the clues. You will hear stories that blur the lines between myth and reality, and by the end, you will see why this club, despite its end over 2 centuries ago, still holds a grip on our imagination. From their influence over politics, their scandalous rituals, and the men who lived double lives, the Hellfire Club was more than a secret society, it was a mirror held up to the corrupt and powerful systems of its time. Chapter 1, The Origins of the Hellfire Club. The year was 1746, and Britain was at a crossroads. The nation was grappling with the aftershocks of the Jacobite Rebellion, wars abroad, and a rapidly evolving social order at home. Against this turbulent backdrop, Sir Francis Dashwood, a wealthy and eccentric Englishman, sought to create a place where the elite could gather to defy societal norms and indulge in forbidden pleasures. What began as a gathering of like-minded aristocrats, tired of the conservative restraints of British society, soon evolved into something far more shadowy and influential. Dashwood was no ordinary nobleman. Born into privilege, he had a keen interest in the occult, ancient mythology, and esoteric knowledge. His travels through Europe, particularly to Italy and Greece, had introduced him to secret religious rites and rituals that fascinated him. It was these interests that led him to gather a circle of similarly inclined men who shared his love for debauchery, irreverence, and the subversion of traditional moral values. The initial gatherings of this elite group were held at Dashwood's family estate, West Wickham, a picturesque location that would become infamous for its underground caves and lavish temples dedicated to pagan gods. The members were drawn from Britain's upper echelons, nobles, politicians, and even members of the clergy. Though outwardly respectable, these men found in the club a place where they could escape the public eye and engage in behaviors that would have scandalized Victorian society. At first, the gatherings had the air of a rebellious gentleman's club. Dashwood and his companions dressed in costumes, recited bawdy poetry, and parroted religious rites, laughing in the face of the very institutions that governed their everyday lives. They took pleasure in mocking the church and the strict moral codes that defined 18th-century British society. But over time, as the group grew in both size and influence, it began to take on a more ominous tone. What had started as a light-hearted form of rebellion soon developed into something darker. The members of the club began to dabble in the occult, performing secret rituals in Dashwood's elaborate underground grottos. The club became infamous for its bacchanalian feasts, where wine flowed freely and the participants indulged in behaviors that tested the limits of decency. There were whispers of orgies, sacrifices, and summoning dark forces, though no evidence has ever definitively proven the most extreme rumors. Despite these rumors, the true purpose of the club was never fully disclosed. Some claimed it was nothing more than a place for aristocratic men to indulge their basest desires. Others believed that the club served as a hidden political powerhouse, where Britain's elite gathered to manipulate the nation's future. These rumors were further fueled by the inclusion of notable politicians and public figures, whose presence in the club lent it an air of clandestine influence. The rise of the Hellfire Club must be understood in the context of 18th-century Europe, a time when secret societies thrived across the continent. Europe was a land of contrasts. While the Age of Enlightenment promoted rationality, science, and progress, there was a simultaneous undercurrent of fascination with mysticism, alchemy, and the occult. This was an era when the Masonic lodges were gaining popularity, and whispers of hidden knowledge being passed down through secret orders were common in elite circles. Britain, in particular, was grappling with its own contradictions. The Industrial Revolution was in its early stages, slowly transforming the country from a largely agrarian society into one dominated by urbanization and commerce. Traditional structures of power were being challenged, and new wealth was being created, often by men who did not come from noble bloodlines. Amid these changes, the aristocracy clung to their privileges, creating a divide between the old ruling class and the emerging middle class. It was within this environment that the Hellfire Club found its footing. It catered to an elite group of men who felt themselves above the moral restraints of the common populace. They sought refuge in secrecy, where they could mock the rigid morality of the day and experiment with ideas and practices considered blasphemous or dangerous. This was not a club for the faint of heart, it was a place where reputations could be ruined, power could be wielded behind closed doors, and societal norms were shattered with impunity. Sir Francis Dashwood was the undeniable leader of the club, but he was not its only influential member. John Wilkes, a radical politician, was another key figure who attended the club's secret meetings. Known for his fiery speeches in opposition to the monarchy, Wilkes found in the Hellfire Club a place where he could form strategic alliances with other political players. His relationship with the club would later become the subject of scandal, as his enemies sought to expose his involvement in its debauched rituals. Then there was Thomas Potter, the son of the Archbishop of Canterbury, who, despite his father's religious authority, was an active member of the club. His involvement illustrated the hypocrisy of many of the club's members, men who, in public, upheld the values of church and state but in private reveled in their rejection. Even Benjamin Franklin, one of the founding fathers of the United States, was rumored to have attended meetings of the club during his time in England. Though there is little evidence to suggest that Franklin took part in the more scandalous activities, his association with the group speaks to its widespread influence. Men of power were drawn to the Hellfire Club, whether for its political connections, its air of rebellion, or its promise of forbidden pleasures. Though their activities largely ceased by the 1760s, its legacy endures to this day. The rumors and myths that surround it have only grown over time, fueled by both historical accounts and the imaginations of those who have studied its secrets. The idea of a group of powerful men gathering in secret to manipulate the world has become a trope in conspiracy theories, and the Hellfire Club remains one of the most infamous secret societies in history. In the coming chapters, we will dig deeper into the individuals who made up this club, the rituals that defined their meetings, and the political machinations that may have been orchestrated behind the scenes. We will also explore the impact of the Hellfire Club on modern secret societies and its influence on popular culture, from literature to film. But first, let us continue to examine the foundations of this notorious group, how it came to be, and why its shadow looms so large over history. Chapter 2, The Elite Members and Their Influence. John Montagu, 4th Earl of Sandwich, another prominent member, exemplified the moral contradictions of the Hellfire Club. As First Lord of the Admiralty, Montagu held immense influence over Britain's naval power, but his association with the Hellfire Club led to scandal and accusations of corruption. While he was responsible for crucial reforms in the Royal Navy, Montagu's private life, steeped in excess and debauchery, made him a target for political opponents. His enemies exploited his connection to the Hellfire Club to undermine his credibility, turning public opinion against him. The Hellfire Club wasn't just a gathering of pleasure seekers, it attracted some of the most powerful figures of its time, men who not only held influence in the public sphere but wielded it behind closed doors, away from the scrutiny of society. Their power extended far beyond the confines of their private gatherings, as they used the club's discreet environment to plot, strategize, and secure their positions in the ever-shifting political landscape of 18th-century Britain. Sir Francis Dashwood, the founder and de facto leader of the club, was an eccentric aristocrat with a passion for classical art, pagan rituals, and, most notably, political maneuvering. He wasn't content to merely indulge in the hedonistic pleasures for which the club was famous. Dashwood saw the Hellfire Club as a platform where men of power could form alliances and influence policy without the constraints of Parliament's prying eyes. John Wilkes, another key figure, used his connections within the club to gain access to powerful backers who could support his fight against governmental censorship. Wilkes was known for pushing the boundaries of acceptable discourse, both in and out of Parliament, and his membership in the Hellfire Club only added to his reputation as a rebel against the establishment. Then there was Benjamin Franklin, whose involvement with the club continues to spark intrigue. Though his participation was more occasional and peripheral, Franklin's time spent with Hellfire members during his diplomatic missions in Britain suggests that he recognized the club's potential for networking. His close relationship with Sir Francis Dashwood, in particular, indicates that Franklin was not immune to the allure of the secretive gatherings. While Franklin himself may not have indulged in the same excesses as some of his counterparts, he was a pragmatic man who understood the value of maintaining relationships with influential individuals, especially when those individuals held sway over the very government Franklin sought to negotiate with. Beneath the veneer of decadence and indulgence, the Hellfire Club served as a breeding ground for political strategy. The secrecy of the meetings allowed its members to discuss and plot in ways that would have been unthinkable in the formal setting of Parliament or royal courts. Many members of the club held high-ranking positions in government or aristocracy, and they used these connections to push their agendas, often at the expense of the public good. The club provided a space where deals could be made without public scrutiny, where alliances could be formed that would later shape national policy. For men like Dashwood, who served as Chancellor of the Exchequer, these meetings were more than just an escape, they were an opportunity to consolidate power. Dashwood's tenure in government was marked by controversial economic policies, some of which may have been influenced by the private discussions that took place within the walls of the Hellfire Club. The club became a perfect environment for those seeking to manipulate public policy for personal gain. The secrecy ensured that members could engage in backroom deals without fear of reprisal. It's not far-fetched to imagine that decisions made within the club's secret meetings had ripple effects that influenced government appointments, economic policies, and even military strategies. The mystique of the Hellfire Club was inseparable from the power it held over its members and the wider world. Secrecy was not just a tool for discretion, it was the foundation upon which the club's allure and influence rested. The very nature of a secret society allowed its members to operate outside the norms of public accountability. Without the constraints of societal judgment, the club provided an ideal environment for men to express their true selves, to voice ideas and make plans that they could never risk in public. For many members, the club's secrecy also served as a shield against scandal. Public exposure would have spelled ruin for many of these men, whose reputations and careers were built on maintaining a facade of propriety. The club's private meetings allowed them to engage in behavior that, if known, would have led to public disgrace. Yet, the need for secrecy also meant that they had leverage over one another. The threat of exposure became a powerful tool within the club, ensuring that no member would betray the others. The rituals and symbols of the organization also played a crucial role in maintaining this aura of secrecy. While the wild rumors of satanic worship and debauchery certainly attracted attention, they also served to obfuscate the true nature of the club's activities. By encouraging these sensational stories, the club's members were able to distract from the more serious political discussions that were happening behind the scenes. The legacy of the club's elite members extends beyond their time. Though the club eventually faded from prominence, the power dynamics it exemplified, the intersection of wealth, influence, and secrecy, remain relevant today. The Hellfire Club was not merely a social gathering, but a microcosm of how power is often wielded behind the scenes, away from the public eye. Chapter 3: Rituals, Rumors, and Debauchery. Stepping into the heart of the Hellfire Club's clandestine world, one encounters a maze of tales that intertwine fact with fiction. At the center of their notorious reputation were the infamous gatherings, whispered about in darkened corridors and gossiped over in taverns. The club wasn't merely a place for political conversation or elite bonding, it was where boundaries were stretched, rules were broken, and societal taboos were gleefully discarded. Here, indulgence wasn't a vice, it was a ritual. The gatherings hosted by the club were nothing short of legendary, both for their grandeur and their excess. At its height, the club was said to convene in elaborate settings, subterranean caves and lavish estates, locations designed to shroud the events in secrecy. These places often had hidden passages and concealed rooms, giving the gatherings an even more mysterious air. The attire at these gatherings was far from the formal dress of the outside world. Instead, members wore costumes, sometimes designed to mock religious figures or authority, symbolizing their disdain for the moral expectations of the time. The rituals themselves often began with extravagant feasts, where the finest wines flowed freely, and indulgent foods were consumed without restraint. These feasts weren't simply moments of gluttony, they symbolized the rejection of religious temperance and societal restraint. After all, in a world where abstinence and self-control were preached, the Hellfire Club embraced the opposite. Following these indulgences, the true rituals began. While much has been exaggerated over the years, there is no denying the club's fascination with subversion and blasphemy. The rumored presence of black masses or mock ceremonies was not about devil worship but about mocking the church and its authority. These mock rituals often included profane parodies of religious services, intended to shock and scandalize. They were designed to challenge the very core of religious and societal power, forcing members to confront their own morality, or lack thereof. The most infamous rumor surrounding the Hellfire Club's rituals involved supposed black magic, invocations of dark forces, and even orgies. While much of this is likely exaggerated, it is true that these gatherings were known for pushing boundaries. Women, often referred to as nuns in the club's inner circles, were invited to participate. These women were not part of the nobility but were chosen for their willingness to participate in the debauchery that followed. What is known is that these gatherings allowed for a level of freedom that was otherwise unavailable in public life. But how much of this was real? Were these men truly involved in satanic practices and rituals, or was this simply the product of an overactive imagination fueled by fear of the unknown? Many of the rumors surrounding the Hellfire Club's involvement in devil worship stemmed from their deliberate use of symbols associated with dark forces. Pentagrams were often seen in the decor, not as symbols of true belief in the occult but as deliberate provocations, a way to keep their critics guessing and to maintain the allure of their secrecy. One of the most widespread tales involves the summoning of demons during their rituals. The members, it was said, would gather around an altar and perform rites to call forth dark entities to serve their desires. In reality, these rites were more about parody and spectacle than any genuine attempt to commune with evil. The club was more interested in mocking authority, both religious and political, than actually embracing the occult. However, the use of such shocking imagery helped fuel the rumors and ensured the club's place in the history of infamy. The orgies, however, seem to have been far closer to fact than fiction. While the extent of these events may have been embellished, it is clear that the club's gatherings involved a level of sexual freedom that was unprecedented for the time. In a society where outward displays of chastity were expected, the club's members reveled in their ability to transgress these norms. In this space, far from the watchful eyes of the public, they indulged their desires without fear of judgment. Symbols played a crucial role in the club's identity, and they were used not only to intimidate outsiders but also to bind members together in secrecy. The pentagram, a symbol often associated with the occult, was one of the most prominent images used in their gatherings. For the Hellfire Club, the pentagram wasn't necessarily a sign of allegiance to dark forces, but a tool to further their rebellious image. The use of such a controversial symbol only added to their allure and mystique, ensuring that those outside the club would continue to speculate about their true intentions. Another important aspect of the club's symbolism was the secret oaths sworn by members. These oaths were designed to create a sense of loyalty and brotherhood, ensuring that what happened within the club's walls remained hidden from the outside world. To break an oath was to betray the group, and the consequences of such betrayal were severe, if not physically, then certainly socially. These oaths helped solidify the bond between members, creating a sense of trust in an environment where trust was often in short supply. The rituals performed by the club, while often shocking and debaucherous, also served as important bonding exercises. They allowed members to test the limits of their own morality and to challenge the boundaries of what was socially acceptable. By participating in these rituals, members demonstrated their commitment to the club and their willingness to defy the norms of society. Despite the darkness surrounding the club's reputation, there was a deeper purpose behind these rituals. In many ways, they were an expression of the Enlightenment ideals that were gaining traction during the 18th century. The Hellfire Club was not just about indulgence, it was about questioning authority, challenging established power structures, and exploring the limits of personal freedom. In this sense, the rituals served as a way for members to confront their own beliefs and to push back against the restrictions placed upon them by society. Though the club thrived on secrecy, their notoriety inevitably caught up with them. As the rumors of devil worship, black magic, and sexual excess spread, the public's fascination turned to outrage. The club's members, many of whom were influential political figures, found themselves the targets of scandal. Despite their wealth and power, the weight of public condemnation could not be ignored. For some, the scandal surrounding the club was a small price to pay for the freedom they enjoyed within its walls. For others, the stain of their association with the club would follow them for the rest of their lives, impacting their reputations and careers. But for all of them, the club represented a place where they could explore their darkest desires, question the rules of society, and indulge in pleasures that were otherwise forbidden. By the end of this chapter, the truth behind the Hellfire Club's rituals remains elusive. While the rumors of devil worship and black magic may have been exaggerated, there is no doubt that the club's gatherings pushed the boundaries of what was considered acceptable in 18th-century society. Their legacy endures not just because of the scandal they caused, but because they represented a challenge to the status quo, a rejection of the rules that governed the world outside their secret gatherings. Chapter 4: Political Intrigue and the Club's Influence on British Politics. The Hellfire Club was not merely a hub for indulgence and revelry, it was also a breeding ground for political maneuvering and secret alliances. Though their reputation was rooted in scandal and excess, behind the scenes, the club served as a covert meeting place for influential figures to shape the future of Britain. Men of power came together under the cloak of secrecy, using the club's veiled environment to discuss matters of state, craft underhanded strategies, and form allegiances that would affect decisions in Parliament, the courts, and even the monarchy itself. Inside these hidden gatherings, political deals were forged. Sir Francis Dashwood, the club's most notorious figure, was known not only for his extravagant parties but also for his deep involvement in politics. A man with considerable sway, he wielded his influence quietly but effectively, and many of the decisions that rippled through the British government had their origins in the private chambers of the Hellfire Club. Dashwood himself became Chancellor of the Exchequer, and his policies were often debated and refined among fellow members before reaching the floor of Parliament. Behind the scenes, a shadow parliament in action. The club was a playground for those who wanted to operate beyond the boundaries of conventional politics. These elite members held positions of considerable authority in government, yet the club provided them with a space where they could plot without fear of public scrutiny. Decisions about international trade, colonial policies, and even military actions were whispered among the members, who saw the club as an opportunity to enact their personal ambitions under the radar. John Montagu, the 4th Earl of Sandwich, was another key figure who used his position within the club to forward his political agenda. As First Lord of the Admiralty, Montagu had direct control over Britain's naval forces during a time when the empire was expanding its global reach. But within the walls of the club, he was free from the rigid decorum of Westminster. Here, he could consult with his fellow Hellfire members, exchanging favors and seeking advice on how to maintain dominance over his rivals. His decisions often reflected the collective interests of the club's members, who, despite their personal vices, had a singular goal: the accumulation and preservation of power. These clandestine meetings influenced key parliamentary decisions that shaped Britain's future. The members, shielded by their wealth and status, could exert pressure on votes, manipulate public opinion, and twist the arms of those in power, ensuring that their interests were well protected. The club's political influence did not go unnoticed, and with power came inevitable scandal. Numerous incidents linked the Hellfire Club to affairs of state, particularly when personal indulgences began to intersect with public office. One of the most infamous political scandals involved John Wilkes, a radical politician and journalist who used his ties to the club to bolster his own cause. Wilkes, known for his outspoken attacks on the government, found himself at the center of a libel case after publishing a satirical piece that mocked both the king and his ministers. While publicly, Wilkes maintained the image of a champion of free speech, privately, he leveraged his Hellfire connections to evade the harshest punishments. The scandal shook the political establishment, and although Wilkes was eventually imprisoned, the protection he received from his Hellfire comrades allowed him to maintain a degree of influence even from behind bars. Perhaps even more notorious was the scandal surrounding the Earl of Sandwich himself. Montagu's close association with the club led to multiple accusations of corruption and debauchery, with rumors swirling that his personal life was as chaotic as his political dealings. His involvement in the club's rituals and excesses became public knowledge, fueling a moral panic that implicated several high-ranking officials. To protect their own, club members orchestrated a series of cover-ups, suppressing evidence and silencing witnesses. These efforts only further cemented the perception that the Hellfire Club was a dangerous force in British politics. The Hellfire Club's growing influence eventually sparked a backlash, not just from political rivals but from the wider public. As word of their secret meetings, wild rituals, and behind-the-scenes manipulations spread, the club became a lightning rod for public outrage. Religious leaders, in particular, were alarmed by the reports of blasphemous acts and devil worship associated with the group. To many, the Hellfire Club represented a direct challenge to the moral order of society, and its members were viewed as corrupting influences on the nation's youth and the integrity of its institutions. Newspapers seized on the opportunity to sensationalize the club's activities, publishing lurid stories about orgies, occult ceremonies, and political conspiracies. These tales, whether true or exaggerated, fueled a growing sense of mistrust toward the aristocracy. The idea that a small group of men could wield such unchecked power behind the scenes of government was unsettling, and the public began demanding action. The Crown and the Church, both concerned about maintaining their grip on authority, eventually took notice of the Hellfire Club's activities. King George III, wary of the growing unrest, quietly initiated investigations into the club's most prominent members. While few concrete actions were taken to dismantle the group, these investigations signaled that the Crown was growing wary of the club's influence, recognizing that its continued existence posed a threat to the stability of the realm. Religious authorities were even more vocal in their condemnation, with clergymen delivering fiery sermons denouncing the club's members as servants of Satan. Churches began calling for the excommunication of any member associated with the Hellfire Club, and religious pamphlets circulated widely, depicting the club as a demonic force working to undermine the very foundations of Christian society. Despite this mounting opposition, the Hellfire Club's influence was difficult to fully eradicate. Its members were too powerful, too well-connected, and their secrets too well-guarded. Though they operated in the shadows, their presence was felt in the highest echelons of power. The public may have raged against them, but the Hellfire Club continued to exist, a secret force steering the course of history from behind closed doors. Chapter 5: The Fall of the Hellfire Club. As the club expanded its influence and its members indulged in increasingly extreme behaviors, cracks began to form from within. What started as a fraternity of like-minded elites, united by their desire for hedonistic freedom and political power, gradually became a battleground of clashing egos and hidden agendas. The very nature of their secretive existence, built on rebellion and exclusivity, sowed the seeds of their undoing. Over time, the organization faced growing discontent from its own members. What had once been a sanctuary of indulgence, free from the prying eyes of society, turned into a place where rivalries simmered beneath the surface. The camaraderie that had initially defined the group was eroded by jealousy, greed, and power plays. High-ranking members vied for control, each seeking to use the club's influence for personal gain. Sir Francis Dashwood, the founder, had once been the undisputed leader. His vision of creating a space for the elite to indulge their wildest impulses while also engaging in intellectual debate was slowly lost to chaos. As the group expanded, more members with less loyalty to Dashwood's original ideals joined. These newcomers were often more interested in the club's debauchery than in its supposed philosophical pursuits, leading to a growing divide among members. Personal rivalries began to fracture the internal structure, as high-ranking members no longer trusted each other. John Wilkes' radical and controversial political views and his growing ambition for public office put him at odds with other members in the club, who preferred to remain hidden in the shadows. While Wilkes continued to use the club to forge political alliances and connections, others began to see him as a liability, a man too willing to bring attention to their secret meetings. The internal power struggles reached a point where some members began leaking information to outsiders, a fatal mistake for a group whose very existence depended on secrecy. As the internal conflicts brewed, external forces began closing in on the organization. The religious and political elite, long suspicious of the group's activities, started taking more aggressive steps to undermine and expose its members. The group's debauchery had always been the subject of rumors, but now there were whispers of something darker, accusations of dark magic, blasphemy, and sedition. The religious authorities, particularly those aligned with the Church of England, could no longer ignore the Hellfire Club's blatant disregard for societal and moral norms. Public officials, pressured by the church and fearful of a growing wave of scandal, began actively investigating the club. Local clergymen would rally their congregations, decrying the club's activities in sermons, painting its members as immoral men hell-bent on corrupting society from the inside. As the club's existence became harder to deny, the authorities looked for ways to break it apart. Political leaders, too, were growing uneasy. The Hellfire Club's secrecy made it a prime target for suspicion, especially as its members held key positions in the government. While the club had initially been a place where politicians and noblemen could forge alliances, it was now seen as a threat to the established order. Some feared that the club was working behind the scenes to manipulate political outcomes, using their clandestine meetings to influence elections and governmental decisions. The pressure was mounting, and many members began to distance themselves from the club to preserve their reputations. A series of public scandals involving prominent members further damaged the group's image. One particularly damaging event involved John Montague, 4th Earl of Sandwich, whose personal indulgences became the subject of public gossip. His behavior, once tolerated as eccentricity, was now seen as dangerous excess, and his political enemies seized the opportunity to paint him, and by extension, the Hellfire Club, as a corrupting influence. The backlash from such incidents only added fuel to the growing pressure from authorities to shut the group down. As investigations closed in, members of the club were forced to go underground. Meetings became more secretive, held in more remote locations and under tighter security. But despite these efforts, the group's days were numbered. The once powerful organization, which had operated with impunity for years, was crumbling under the weight of its own excess and the relentless pressure from the outside world. Though the organization eventually disbanded under the weight of scandal, internal strife, and pressure from the authorities, its influence did not disappear so easily. The elite circles from which its members came continued to wield power in politics, business, and society. The relationships forged within the club did not dissolve overnight. Many members continued to maintain their influence, albeit more discreetly, ensuring that the shadow of the club lingered long after its fall. In fact, some of the club's most significant legacies were political. Figures like John Wilkes, who had used the club as a platform for his own radical ideas, went on to become key players in the struggle for freedom of the press and civil liberties in Britain. His defiance of authority and willingness to push boundaries mirrored the spirit of the Hellfire Club, even as the group itself dissolved. Meanwhile, other members who had distanced themselves from the scandals of the club continued to operate in high society, ensuring that the influence of the Hellfire Club was felt in more subtle ways. The club's legacy also lived on in popular culture and literature. Tales of the group's wild rituals, secret meetings, and political machinations captured the public's imagination. Writers like Horace Walpole, who had close ties to some of the club's members, used these stories as inspiration for Gothic novels that portrayed secret societies as mysterious and dangerous forces operating behind the scenes. The club became a symbol of both the allure and the danger of unchecked power. Chapter 6: The Hellfire Club's Cultural Legacy. The Hellfire Club may have disbanded over 2 centuries ago, but its name and legacy continue to echo through the corridors of modern culture. From literature and film to countless conspiracy theories, the allure of secret societies has never waned, and the club remains one of the most mysterious and captivating of them all. Its cultural resonance has shaped narratives and stoked imaginations, not just because of the group's elite membership or scandalous behavior, but because of what it symbolizes: the unchecked power that operates behind the scenes. Impact on popular culture. The organization first stepped into the world of literature in the 19th century, thanks to writers fascinated by its scandalous reputation. Novelists like Charles Dickens, who understood the draw of the forbidden, wove in elements of secret societies into their works. However, it wasn't until later, with the rise of Gothic literature, that the Hellfire Club truly found its place in fiction. Writers like Bram Stoker and others used the allure of such clandestine organizations to enhance the dark atmospheres of their novels, appealing to readers' curiosity about the hidden lives of the powerful. This fascination transcended books, leaping into the realm of cinema and television in the 20th century. Modern film depictions often use secret societies to build tension, mystery, and conspiracy. The Hellfire Club is no exception. In some movie productions where the Hellfire Club serves as a villainous cabal pulling the strings behind world events, the group's image as a dangerous, elite organization continues to thrive. Though wildly exaggerated in its portrayal, it taps into the widespread notion that secret, powerful entities shape the world without our knowledge. This theme resonates with audiences for a simple reason: fear of the unknown. The secrecy of the Hellfire Club, combined with tales of debauchery, lends itself to modern interpretations that see the club as the forerunner of shadowy groups such as the Illuminati or Bilderberg Group. These portrayals keep the legacy alive, drawing in viewers with the promise of unveiling long-buried truths. The Hellfire Club, like many secret societies, stokes our imaginations because of what it represents: exclusivity, power, and the potential to control events from behind the curtain. There's something undeniably alluring about a group of people who can operate without accountability, using their influence for pleasure, control, or manipulation. This fascination with the unseen, the idea that certain decisions shaping society are made in smoke-filled rooms out of the public eye, is not new. It taps into the primal human fear of being at the mercy of forces we cannot see or control. Though the Hellfire Club belongs to history, its essence lives on in today's power structures. The elitism, secrecy, and influence that characterize the club have parallels in modern times. Consider the exclusive clubs and think tanks where the world's most powerful figures gather to discuss policy and business. While these modern organizations may not indulge in the hedonistic pleasures for which the Hellfire Club was infamous, they share the same principle of conducting affairs away from public scrutiny. Meetings of groups like the Bilderberg Group, Davos attendees, or certain elite political gatherings remain closed to outsiders, fueling the idea that global decisions are made without transparency. Whether these modern groups actually mirror the secrecy of the Hellfire Club, the public perception is that these are the contemporary equivalents of the shadowy, exclusive societies of old. The idea that elites continue to meet behind closed doors, deciding the fate of nations and economies, has kept the Hellfire Club's spirit alive. This perception is often linked to modern conspiracy theories that imagine a secret few controlling vast swathes of the world. And as long as there are powerful individuals meeting in private, the mystique of the Hellfire Club, with all its connotations of secret power and forbidden knowledge, will continue to echo through time. The club's cultural legacy lives on not only because of its notorious past but because it embodies something larger: the tension between those with power and those without. It represents the fear of hidden agendas, the allure of privilege, and the temptation to imagine that all is not as it seems. From Sir Francis Dashwood's secretive ceremonies to John Wilkes' fight for freedom of speech, the actions of these men reverberated through history, leaving behind a legacy of both fascination and fear. Their ability to blend pleasure with power made them more than just a footnote in history. They became a symbol of how influence often works behind the scenes, away from public scrutiny. But what makes the Hellfire Club stand out even more is the sense of rebellion mixed with privilege. These were men who could have enjoyed power in conventional ways, yet they chose to create a parallel space where the rules didn't apply. This blending of privilege with defiance set them apart, and it's a pattern we see echoed throughout history. Their legacy forces us to ask tough questions about the nature of power, questions that are just as relevant today as they were in the 18th century. As you reflect on the stories we've shared, one question lingers: does the spirit of secret societies like the Hellfire Club still exist among today's elites? Do powerful individuals still gather behind closed doors to make decisions that affect the world without public knowledge? Whether it's through modern-day think tanks, exclusive social clubs, or whispered backroom deals, the allure of secrecy remains as strong as ever. Now that you've explored the mysterious world of the Hellfire Club, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you believe secret societies still exist and influence global events? Could there be modern equivalents of the Hellfire Club operating today, hidden from public view? Share your ideas in the comments below and let's start a conversation about the unseen forces shaping our world. If you've enjoyed this deep dive into history's hidden corners, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. We've got plenty more audiobooks and fascinating stories lined up, from the secret societies that shaped world events to the untold stories of power and influence throughout history. Don't forget to share this with your friends who love a good mystery, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the shadows of history. There's always more to uncover, and we can't wait to explore it with you.